This is my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Okay, so in this episode we see the rest of the fight with Enigma, which goes about as you would expect because Miyamoto is able, as we established, Terunosuke Miyamoto is able to fold people into paper, which isn't very powerful as a direct ability and a direct ability to hurt people, but he's actually pretty creative with how he uses it, and I'll get to him in a minute. And also Rohan does his thing where he successfully looks at Kanoto's back, and it winds up backfiring horribly. So I'm going to cover that part first because it kind of just happens in the background of the main story, but and kind of sort of is important for actually watching the story. So the episode starts off with Josuke again unfolding the piece of paper and getting shot point blank in the face by Terunosuke, who pops his arm out of the piece of paper with a gun and then opens fire on Josuke, and everybody knows the meme. It is a very popular meme from the JoJo's fandom. Everybody uses it. It's for a bunch of different situations, but in any case, it then cuts back to Rohan at his house with Kanoto, and he actually does trick Kanoto to actually walk on a hole in the floor, pointing out that the floor is actually burned out and that they actually put a carpet there ahead of time. And he knew that. He covered the hole with a carpet so that he knew not to step on it. So when Kanoto walks on the blanket, he just kind of falls through the floor and is unable to actually protect himself and stop Rohan from seeing his back. Rohan finally looks at his back but doesn't notice anything odd, but Kanoto actually does start acting very odd, pointing out that he's finished and he also starts foaming rapidly from the mouth, and then he proclaims to Rohan that he doesn't know why, but for the longest time he's always had a fear of people seeing his back because he believed that if everybody saw his back, he'd be finished. And now that Rohan has actually saw, he declares that it's over for him. And Rohan merely states that nothing has happened and that everything's fine, but everything is not fine because shortly after Rohan says that, Kanoto's back starts to peel away, and then the man dies in the upstairs. So yeah, Rohan understandably panics, unsure of what's actually happening, until a stand appears behind him, and the stand calls itself Cheap Trick, and that and then proceeds to whisper to Rohan to let him ride on his back. And Rohan understandably panics because this stand just kind of came out of nowhere, and quickly realizing that the stand is what killed Kanoto, he jumps off the balcony and downstairs and tries to put as much distance between himself and the stand as possible. But that doesn't work because it immediately teleports to Rohan's back as soon as he tries. And Rohan understandably panics because he has no idea how to actually get rid of the stand, and then proceeds to attack Cheap Trick with his own stand to try and read his weaknesses and figure out what it is. Only for him to read his own mind and peel away his own flesh to reveal the contents within. At which point Cheap Trick reveals that it was actually Kanoto's stands, but Kanoto wasn't actually strong enough to wield it. So, or at least not fully. So yeah, the way Cheap Trick works is that it actually, as its name implies, it actually hides on a person's back, whispers to people to try in an effort to get them to show other people its back, and then eventually curiosity gets better at somebody else, and they eventually start looking at their back, and that's how the stand actually works. It kills somebody, then moves to a new host. At which point Cheap Trick declares that he needs that Rohan needs to destroy the pictures that he took. And Rohan quickly realizes that Cheap Trick was most likely created as a means of getting Rohan to get rid of all the evidence that they collected up to this point to try and find Yoshikage Kira, and that Yoshihiro Kira is most likely behind the attack. And he tries to go outside, but quickly realizes that if he shows his back to anybody, he's screwed. Case in point, a milkman comes by and declares that he's actually a fan of Rohan's work before leaving. And Rohan has to hide his back from him the whole time. So Rohan goes upstairs to investigate the photos and try and figure out which one is Yoshikage Kira, and which one they actually want to. Yoshihiro Kira might actually want destroyed, but unable to figure something out, and realizing that he needs to contact the rest of the group to figure out to help let them know what's going on. He starts racking his brain for ideas, and that's the last we'll see of him for the rest of the episode, because again, it's important to the main plot. So back to the main plot of the episode, where Josuke has just been shot. And except he hasn't actually been shot because Crazy Diamond, but Terunosuke Miyamoto points out that he shouldn't have expected any less, because he quickly realizes that Crazy Diamond is pretty fast, and he knew that a gun wasn't actually going to do anything. So he realizes that he actually does need to actually confront Josuke personally, and he does. He emerges from the piece of paper, and all the while Josuke mocks his stand, pointing out that that is kind of a crappy ability, that he can just turn himself into paper. And Terunosuke Miyamoto agrees with him after revealing himself. He points out that he can only turn somebody into paper, and that it is kind of a crappy ability, but the way it worked. But he does also point out that any piece of paper torn will actually deal damage to the object within. In case in point, he pulls out another piece of paper and rips it, pointing out that, and then when he breaks it, a bowl of ramen falls out and breaks. So he doesn't make any idle threats. And he also points out that Josuke, and he also proceeds to point out that there's another piece of paper that is Koichi, and that it's, in case in point, he wrote Koichi's name on it. And he tells Josuke that if he wants his friend back, he's going to have to be very careful, because he can quite easily just rip the piece of paper and deal with Koichi that way. So at which point Josuke goes in to try and fight, only for Miyamoto to actually retreat back into a piece of paper and purposely drop the piece of paper with Koichi's name on it in front of a moving vehicle. At which point Josuke shows his sign of fear, biting his lip, and at which point Enigma actually attacks him. And long story short, Josuke tries to fight back against Enigma, but is unable to, because Enigma is able to turn him into paper, and Josuke is just barely able to grab onto a nearby parking meter post, I think is what the post is. I believe it's a parking meter. But he grabs a post of some sort, is my point. But even with grabbing the post, he's unable to actually pull himself out, and goes into the piece of paper and starts to become folded up. At which point Miyamoto gloats over his victory over Josuke, pointing out that it was a lot easier than he thought it was going to be. Only for Josuke to suddenly, and also Yuya Fungami declares that he is glad that he didn't actually help Josuke, because if he had to face off against Miyamoto, he knows very quickly that he's going to lose, because his stand isn't powerful enough to actually fight back. But before any of them could actually lament on the fact that Josuke has actually been defeated, Josuke actually does pop out of the piece of paper using Crazy Diamond to repair the posts that he had pulled out ahead of time. And while he's unable to successfully pull himself out of the piece of paper completely, and he's still retreating into it, he does profess that Miyamoto should rip up the paper as soon as possible if he is going to turn Josuke into paper, pointing out that when he does get out, he's going to kill Miyamoto, and is going to declares that even if it was a 1% chance, he jumped at the piece of paper anyway, because it could have been Koichi. Even if it was a 1% chance, it could have been Koichi. So he didn't want to lose his friend, even if the odds were very slim that it was Koichi to begin with. So he fell for the trap willingly, knowing full well that it could have been that it may or may not have been Koichi. But if it had been Koichi, he would have been more than willing to sacrifice himself to save his friends. And with that, he retreats back another piece of paper, and the pole goes back into place. And Miyamoto merely stammers a little bit, pointing out that Josuke shouldn't make such idle threats, and then proceeds to whip out another piece of paper, which he apparently hit a taxi in ahead of time, and then proceeds to get into the taxi and tells Yuya Fungami that he was smart to not try and engage him, pointing out that he already has figured out Yuya Fungami's sign of fear, poking at his chin. And that since Yoshihiro Kira didn't want him eliminated, then that Yuya Fungami therefore poses no threat, and that he can just let him go on his merry way. And with that, he gets into the taxi and proceeds to go to Morio Grand Hotel. However, before he can actually get to the Grand Hotel, he's actually attacked by Highway Star. As it turns out, Yuya Fungami was actually moved by Josuke's speech from earlier about wanting to protect Koichi, even if it was a 1% chance of him actually being the piece of paper. And then declares that, and then points out that he and Josuke are actually pretty similar in that regard, because if it had been any of his girls who give him a smile every day, he probably would have jumped in to protect them as well. And with that, because he realizes that Josuke and him are basically the same, he decides to actually engage Miyamoto, much to Miyamoto's chagrin, who points out that it's not a very smart thing to do. But Yuya merely keeps track of where the thing is, so that he can keep an eye on Miyamoto, so that Miyamoto doesn't escape in the taxi. And basically, long story short, Highway Star just clings onto the taxi to keep track of where Miyamoto is going, and knows full well that Miyamoto will never be able to actually escape Highway Star, even if it is only going 60 miles per hour, since the way Highway Star works is that it will relentlessly pursue their target regardless of how far they are from the user. But then Fungami is thrown for a loop when the taxi suddenly stops, and he goes in to inspect it. And sure enough, he notices that there's actually that the taxi is actually stopped, and there doesn't seem to be anybody inside. So he gets closer to investigate, and even uses Highway Star to get a better look at the vehicle, so that he can view it from multiple angles, and notices that there's actually a piece of paper containing Koichi and Josuke's scent lying on the seat. And also notices that something seems a little bit off about it, pointing out that it seems way too easy, and stops Highway Star from actually opening the taxi before he can get a better idea of what's going on. And case in point, he actually sees a piece of paper jammed in the door and realizes that's likely the trap. So once he realizes what the trap is, he actually opens the door willingly and lets the paper out, which turns out to be fire. And somehow Miyamoto was able to actually store fire inside using his stand, which is kind of cool, because it means he can just kind of set up traps using his piece of paper by just sticking it in a door and then opening it, which again showcases just how much utility Terunosuke Miyamoto's stand actually has, because he was able to use Enigma to store fire and use it as a trap later, which is pretty cool. However, after opening the door, Fungami actually grabs the piece of paper from the seat, but a chemical actually spills on it and begins to erode it. And he quickly realizes he needs to open it before the paper actually burns away. And he does, but he gets a massive electrical shock, and he realizes that there's something else in the thing, but he pursues on despite being in unbearable pain. And when he does finally open it, he realizes that it's actually a shredder. And he quickly realizes that he's not going to be able to get anybody out, because not only is the shredder pulling in Josuke and Koichi's paper at an alarming rate, but his stand isn't strong enough to actually stop the shredder, and the on and off switch doesn't work. So with that, Yuya actually shows his sign of fear and pokes his chin, which causes Terunosuke Miyamoto to show up and use Enigma to actually trap him. Only for it to be revealed that was Yuya Fungami's entire plan. She actually showed his sign of fear willingly, which enabled him to become thin enough to slip into the shredder and pull Josuke and Koichi's paper out of the shredder. And once they're free, they're able to actually fight Terunosuke Miyamoto in Yuya Fungami's stead. And sure enough, the first thing Josuke does as soon as the paper is opened is punch Miyamoto right in the face. And Miyamoto quickly panics, realizing that he's now outnumbered and he's quickly losing the advantage. So he picks up the paper containing Yuya Fungami and declares that he's going to rip it in half if Josuke comes any closer. Only for Echo Zack 3 to use its 3 freeze on the piece of paper, so that Miyamoto can't actually rip it in half anymore, because now it's stuck and embedded in the ground, and there's nothing Miyamoto actually has as an advantage. At which point Josuke reiterates the promise he made to Miyamoto that he would kill him if he saw him again, and quickly points out that people like him who manipulate people to actually do the dirty work is kind of disgusting, and he declares that he's going to actually kill Miyamoto, and also points out that he's actually recognize Miyamoto's own sign of fear, which is that when he gets scared, he closes one of his eyes, and when he gets even more scared, he closes both. And with that, Josuke just proceeds to beat up Terunosuke Miyamoto, which with his own power actually turns him, and all the shredded paper lying around, actually turns Miyamoto into a book. So yeah, Miyamoto winds up turning himself in a book with Crazy Diamond's help. So yeah, and with that they actually unfold Yuya Fangami and retrieve Josuke's mom, and then get in the taxi that Miyamoto had stored away, and proceed to bring the book to the library, which then becomes a memorial landmark. So yeah, basically they donate it to the memorial library, and he winds up being part of a permanent resident of the restricted section of the library, which is kind of funny. So, but as they're en route to the library, Josuke merely points out that if Yoshihiro Kira was so desperate to actually trap them, then that means that they might be getting close, and quickly realize that Yoshikage Kira is most likely very close to finding out Yoshikage Kira's identity, and that's why Yoshihiro Kira has actually decided to panic and send out so many stand users all at once. And sure enough, as Koichi gets home, he then gets a call from Rohan. And Rohan basically just tries to let Koichi know what's going on, even though Cheap Trick remarks that it's not going to help very much. And also during this episode, Jotaro goes on his own investigation to find some missing people, pointing out that there's a very small chance, but it's possible that there's actually a victim among one of them, and points out that there's always the possibility that one of them could be Yoshikage Kira's next victim, and he knows that he's going to strike again, so he goes to investigate, pointing out that he can't escape his fate forever. So yeah, and also during the end of this episode, Hayato Kawajiri declares that he's going to film proof that his dad isn't actually his dad, and then goes off to actually go and do that. So after he goes to school, of course, because he's been at school this whole time. But yeah. So this episode sets up a couple of different plot threads, namely that Rohan now has a new stand called Cheap Trick, which has bound itself to his back and is going to kill him if he lets anybody see his back. So he has to figure out a way to actually destroy Cheap Trick without it killing him. So Rohan the team has actually dealt with Terunosuke Miyamoto, which enables them to actually figure out that Yoshihiro Kira is likely trying to stop them from actually figuring out his son's identity, and the fact that he sent out so many stand users means that they're close. And also Hayato Kawajiri is also investigating Yoshikage Kira, and I can imagine he's going to try and be a thorn in their side as well, and that he's going to actually investigate Yoshikage Kira. He's going to find something, and he's going to bring his findings to the Josar group. I can only imagine that's what's going to happen. But in any case, yeah, that's going to do it for my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion over in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter in the description below. And also, be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It really helps me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks, and I always say thanks. So be sure to check those out in the description below as well. Also, if you want to see more videos from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one, whereas the bottom video is the video recommended to you based on YouTube's watch history that you have, and will actually recommend a video based on that and what you've already seen from me. So, if you want to try something new or more of what you like, then be sure to check both those videos out. But regardless of whether or not you do any or all of those things, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!